uh, moderation, my moderators had to you for just a second, and that if you didn't know Michael Harris, how would you introduce him, if you don't mind, before you go into your presentation? The floor is yours.
If I didn't know me?
That is correct.
That's very true.
I would introduce me as a child of the Most High, having a human experience in a spiritual body.
Amen. 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 And Michael, give us an idea of where you're from and what has added to that total being, that fantastic, person that you are today.
I'm trying to do too much. I'm sorry. Ask that question one more again. I'm gonna turn this phone off.
Tell us a little bit about who you are and where you are in your professional life.
Okay. Well, I'm born and raised here in the great state of California at the confluence of two major rivers in this state, the Sacramento River and the American River. This is one of the greatest gardens in the world. It's not the greatest, as though many people here want to say that. The agricultural engine of California is the Central Valley that facilitates the 5th largest economy on the planet. Little old California is the 5th largest economy on planet Earth. Ironically, California is named after an African and indigenous woman, Queen Calafia, at the engagement of Hernan Cortez when California was conquered and colonized by the Spanish conquistadors in 1535. So all of this agricultural bounty is based upon the geographical and geological blessing of this place that is named after an African woman.
My
it's
goodness.
Interesting to build on the Caribbean thing. The African founding father of California, who built the Port of San Francisco, built the first public school in California, was the elected treasurer of San Francisco, was, let's just say, he facilitated California become part of the United States as the first diplomat of African descent. He was born in Spring Garden Estate in a place called the Virgin Islands, today a U.S. territory.
Absolutely. And who is that person? Who is that great person? Do you recall the name?
William Alexander Leidesdorff Jr., Afro-Cuban Danish Jewish. One farm, Leidesdorff Ranch, with 35,521 acres, where the gold rush happened here in California.
Wow. Well, this is really some good bit of history. And I don't even believe my good friend, as learned as he is, Dr. Friedman, did you know some of his new factoids? Some of it was new to me. Okay. Oh, we have you on mute, Dr. Friedman. That's fine. That's fine. Well, thank you.
Yes, it was new to me as well.
Yes, indeed, indeed. So thank you, thank you. I really enjoyed that little piece. And, this was by way of a little introduction to Michael Harris. Michael Harris, thank you so very much. The floor is yours, sir. Thank you, and we look forward to your presentation. Welcome to Watch Africa, Watch Democracy Grow.
Well, I am so happy to be here, and I'll give a brief presentation. I enjoy the workshop model versus the lecture model because it provides interaction and we get to learn from each other, and then it sparks additional dialogue. But in terms of the work that I've done for 20 years, Director of Black Agriculture, through the initial work with the Black Farmers and Agricultural Association based in Tillery, North Carolina, that helped facilitate the Black farmers class action lawsuit with the United States Department of Agriculture, a successful Pittsburgh class action case that is now paying good fruit in the restructuring of the United States Department of Agriculture. Ironically, we call it still to this day because it will always be America's last plantation. And that was established in 1863 in the middle of the US Civil War, when the transition from chattel slavery to employed agricultural labor was quantified at Juneteenth, the last Confederate port in Galveston Island, Texas, at a place that we call the Yellow Rose of Texas, where a 7-week campaign throughout Texas ended the last enslavement of people of African descent in the state that was in rebellion. Other people were still enslaved. But the idea that agricultural production of people of African descent, arguably, some people say 1619, there was some before that, earlier in the New England states. But agriculture was undergirded in the United States through people of African descent working for free. And so the notion that here we are now in the 21st century, because of a lot of things, primarily in my opinion, the planet's lining up, but there's a paradigm shift that's happening throughout the world. And some people want to group it in the limited past. But for people of African descent, it would serve us much better if we look at the world when Africa had a golden legacy and not start the conversation about Africa through the prism of others, and certainly when we are not in a position of strength. It would do us much better to suggest, how did we build the Great Zimbabwe? You know, how did we build the pyramids, 80 of them all up and down the Nile Valley civilization? How did, Mansa Musa acquire his wealth? How did, Hannibal, amass an army and, do what he did throughout Europe, with elephants over the Alps? So there's a paradigm shift that, with our thinking, with our way we structure economies, the way we interact with one another, that is just beginning. And so as we look at a basic need of clean water, of clean and safe shelter, of natural cultural foods, and how we identify each other's spiritual gift and nurture that with an educational system of some sort, we have to begin to do this in alignment with the paradigm shift that honors the ancient past, when we were, in a much better situation. We call it in Nile Valley civilization, Ma'at, which is truth, justice, righteousness, propriety, right order in one word. And as it gets translated into the Latin, it becomes summum bonum, or highest good. So there is quite a bit of primary source documentation to overlay what is just brand new, the continental free trade area, with ancient African concepts where we were in positions of power. So when we start talking about arguably the 4th or 5th largest economy on the planet, with a continental free trade area with roughly $3.5 trillion, barely beating out California, all of Africa, barely beating California in a GDP, so to speak, simply because the infrastructure development over time just hasn't been there. So the African continent and those of us in the diaspora have an amazing opportunity to ride this global paradigm shift, simply because of our travel in the Milky Way galaxy. The ancestors talked about 25,920 years for our sun to revolve around the central sun in the Milky Way galaxy, and the new telescope shows us that there's many, many, many galaxies. So we don't have to limit our thinking and our behavior to short-term memory. We could go into our DNA and look at what the past, distant past has been, look at what the current reality is, and then make some projections into the distant future. And so what my grandma, she would teach me about 7 generations in the past, and what are you gonna do, boy? And look to 7 generations in the future. And so, as we have metaphysical conversations, you put that on square root and just lose your brain. As that telescope showed us, it's like, I had to stop looking at it, because you're gonna tell me this picture that I'm looking at was light from a billion years ago? I don't want to wrap my head around that. That's gonna blow my mind. Let me just deal with the Milky Way, and I can maybe stop there. So the idea that the United States Department of Agriculture, we're just getting ready to do what's called the Census of Agriculture. We're going to have a gathering of agricultural scholars and producers and a cross-section of the agricultural industry. Here in California, just in California, there's a $333 billion working landscape annually. And that's just here in California, working with, the land, comprising not only food, but also forestry, fishing, and other things that are extracted out the land. $333 billion annually. And as you can imagine, people of African descent are less than 1/3 of 1% of that. Again, because of the infrastructure and because of how people of African descent have been precluded through law from participating over time. In fact, when California was established, let me back up. When California was conquered and colonized by the United States government in 1846, and it was under military occupation until September 9th, 1850, when the notion that California becomes a state, because there was a compromise. How can we track down free labor running around and have the gold bounty of California underneath the United States banner, with the stipulation of manifest destiny, which means white males only. So all the land that was previously under Mexican government with a man of African descent, the governor, Pio Pico, now the land all of a sudden is only through the prism of white men. And so now we fast forward to today, the agricultural industry, we're using the word equity and inclusion, and there's wonderful programs for people of African descent to participate in the agricultural industry. But the notion of an equity position and how will I say it? Assembly Bill 3121 is the first time in the entire United States we're going to take a review and look and see if there's any sort of way that we can have some sort of reparative justice of the egregious things that have happened to people of African descent in this land. So the idea that, and I think it's the most perfect thing in the planet, in a place that kind of reminds me of the movie Black Panther. If you look at, Rwanda and Kigali, all that's happened there, and that is one of the key areas to facilitate the Continental Free Trade Area. And if you recall in the movie Black Panther, what gave the Black Panther his strength was an agricultural product that was uniquely prepared by a high priest, a shaman, a spiritual leader that invoked particular special powers with a product that was grown for just that purpose. And so, I just call it collard greens, sweet potatoes, leaves, and stuff like that. It's the same thing. However, you need somebody special to invoke special power to, bless the king with superpowers. But again, so the 7 clusters, and there's that number 7, which is beyond a spiritual power. trade policy, trade facilitation, trade infrastructure, trade finance, trade information, productive capacity, and global integration. Let's just say that. Those 12 clusters. But again, if you overlay that through the prism of ancient African values of Ma'at or Sanam Banam greater good, we completely neutralize the notion of global markets in terms of a financial balance sheet. There is need for clean water in Africa. Let's just say half the deaths, way more than half. Half the deaths is because we don't have clean water. Safe shelter, well, that's just non-existent in some places, particularly 100 miles outside of an urban center, you're not going to have safe shelter. Cultural food, naturally. We don't have to use a synthesized grain that was constructed, in another land as the basis of feeding people on the African continent. And then spiritual gifts. Everybody has a spiritual gift. Some people can, dunk a basketball. Some people can run you over playing football. Some people can just sit and look at that tree and meditate. Some people can look at the star systems and tell you things that you might know about yourself if you paid attention. But if that's your spiritual gift, is looking at the stars, and it is. The idea that agriculture, you look at any culture around the planet, agriculture is the basis of the original indigenous cultures on the planet. And that is the foundation of any culture, is because you got to eat if you're going to be a human being. And if you have a spiritual need, you're going to eat certain foods. And those are the census that the women, particularly along the Nile Valley civilization, when they measured the volume of water in the river and created, meters along the water to figure out where it's going to flood as it inundates, as the heliacal rising of the star Sirius announces the new year, and the calendar new year is on the longest day of the year, where the geographical center of the earth, land masses, and the pyramids were created, or built. And the sister said, built right here, boy. And we got busy and started slicing up rocks and started building pyramids. And so they just so happened to line up with stars in the sky. So there's a methodology of this paradigm shift that I believe, the people that have taught me, that are still living here in California, the oldest Black Studies program in the nation, they're still living. The Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, you overlay that simply with what is actually happening on the continent with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We just have to decide this is what we want to do and do it. And finally, I'll say this. If we look at the Bank of International Settlement, BIS.org, where the Federal Reserve Banks on the planet bank, I was surprised, because I was asked to take a look at that again. I was surprised, very surprised, to see that the Federal Reserve Banks in South Africa, one of the brothers that's a governor of the Federal Reserve Bank of South Africa, he's in a leadership position in one of the committees. And that is, at some point, we'll see that as just as revolutionary as what Nkrumah did when the modern day independence of Ghana happened. So I'll stop right there and just know that agriculture is the basis of our culture. And then you spin it about where you are geographically on the planet. But we have to eat, we have to have shelter, we have to have food. And well, that's kind of the thing. Look, the spiritual food is what you should eat to hone and develop your spiritual gift, whatever that might be. I'll stop right there. Well, Eric is probably taking a break. So
yeah, sorry, no, not taking a break. I was been given some further instructions, but thank you
Ah.
so much. You know, right on time, and you know, it's all spiritual. You know, it's all interconnected one way
Yeah.
or another. So thank you so much for your presentation, and you know, I have some thoughts on that, but I'm going to hold it perhaps until after our other speakers. But I wanted from you though, is there any territory, and I believe that's territory out there, that is doing what you envision in terms of clearly integrating agriculture with growth and its futuristic plan? So as you're reimagining the role of agriculture for growth and development on the continent, is there one either territory within the continent or even within this space here in the United States or elsewhere that you think that has gotten it right?
Well, and I haven't seen them in maybe 2 years now because of COVID. Yafa, Israel, with the Hebrew Israelites, the the vegetarian soul food, they had the best program that I saw on the ground. The Federation of Southern Cooperatives out of Alabama, they have the best infrastructure with the best reach. And John Boyd has the best trumpet, although he doesn't have the reach and the numbers. But and in the Nation of Islam, if you synthesize those, what we tried to do 10 years ago, and you take the best of each, the spiritual food of Hebrew Israelites, the discipline of the Nation of Islam, the reach of the Federation cooperatives, you know, you have something. And, you know, I say it like this: if you stay in Genesis, you know, and leave the rest of the Bible alone in terms of agriculture, because you're supposed to dress and keep the garden and then just do your genealogy and know who your family is, who begat who, and make sure everybody that you know that's in your family ate, you better off. So
Indeed.
that's kind of the way I would answer that question, because there's no one size fits all for Black folks, because we have all been traumatized here in America. Some know it, some don't. Dr. Joy DeGury says it's the best post-traumatic slave syndrome. You might have a PhD and have 10 million in the bank, but you know, you lose your mind one day, you know, in the shower, and you come out and you think you Shaka Zulu and gotta kill somebody. You know, your mind might just snap one day.
Right.
You have post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Indeed, indeed. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate your presentation. Dr. Harris,